In this video, we're going to be reviewing some React code once again. And this one I actually like. I really like this application. This is a developer that's a little bit more than a junior developer, kind of going on to becoming a mid-level developer. And the application that they made is good. It has a good solid foundations. It's following good design patterns, but it just needs a little bit more experience, a little bit more refinement so that this developer can actually perfect their craft and build really senior and complex applications. And so in this video, I want to go over the code. I want to talk about my thoughts and also see what you think, all in the name of becoming a better React developer. And speaking of becoming a better React developer, I'm actually launching a whole new platform specifically to learn React very soon. It's actually coming out on Black Friday this year, so that's very soon. And on the platform, I'm going to have initially one really great course on design patterns in React, which is really my best course so far because it covers all of the most important design patterns in React when it comes to components, when it comes to hook, and also when it comes to the user interface. If you're interested in that and you want to be the first to hear about this platform and all the cool stuff that I have planned, you can join the waitlist. It's going to be linked below. It's codeandcode.ai. I highly recommend it. This is the best thing that I've created by far. So with that being said, now let's get into the video and let's look at this code review. All right, so let's begin. So this here is the repository that we're going to be taking a look at. I'll leave a link to it in the description down below if you want to check it out yourself. This is essentially an e-commerce products application, and I have it open here in my editor ready for us to look at. So this is a simple Vite application. There's no framework, there's no complexity to it. It's simply, I believe, using React Router over here. If I can go here, yeah, it's using the create browser router from React Router, and it has all of these applications here. So it's essentially a single page application. So let's begin. Let's start kind of exploring this application and let's see where we actually get to it. So first, I'm going to go here, I guess, to the homepage and let's see what we have. So here we have the homepage. This is pretty empty, which is fine. I generally like to see small components like this. Let's open up the header here and let's see. This is a skincare brand, revitalize your skin and combat aging with cutting edge formulas. Great. I think we should all take care of our skin a little bit better. This is pretty simple. There's no code for us to really look at. So let's look at another screen. So let's maybe look here at the shop screen. Let's see what we have. So this is the shop screen and already this is okay. I kind of like this. So the shop screen is basically a screen component here, and it's simply rendering out the shop container, which is basically its own component here. There's nothing really wrong with this. And generally you kind of want to have this because in some screens over here, what you typically want to do is you maybe want to access screen level stuff like the parameters from the actual URL. Sometimes maybe you want to fetch some data as well if you want to, and then you pass that data to another component that is essentially responsible for rendering out the actual content of the screen. In this case, the user here, the developer, hasn't really done that because maybe this is a simple screen. There's nothing to do here. But again, let's see what the shop container has, and then maybe we can have some insights as to what's going on. So this shop container here, this is what this looks like. Let me maybe close this to make a little bit more space. So here we have a state value. So this is all a client component, right? There's no framework, there's no server components. Here I have a state value of use state and then category.all. What's category? Is this an enum? Oh, it is an enum. Okay, so first thing about enums is even though TypeScript supports enums, you shouldn't really do enums in your applications. The reason why, and again, I'm not entirely sure on the 100% details here, but the reason why is that whenever this TypeScript gets eventually converted to JavaScript, JavaScript doesn't have like a way to handle enums. And so essentially what ends up happening is the code that is required for JavaScript to have enums is inefficient. And so generally you want to avoid using enums. And instead what you want to do is you want to come here and do something like const and the category, and maybe even put this as a constant category, just like this. And here you want to put all of your categories over here. So like all like this, right? And you want to make it all and so on. And then you use that instead of the actual enum over here. This is better because now TypeScript and JavaScript actually support this, and you're not writing behind the scenes, right? Eventually what gets shipped to the browser, you're not writing inefficient code. And then obviously if you want to have the type of this category, because this is ultimately a type, it's a TypeScript thing, you can also do type here and you can do category, right? And you can get the key of and then the type of, and then you have here all of your categories in case you want to use them in your application. Right, so again, that's kind of how you want to do it, but that's fine. That's not necessarily such a big problem here. We can just move on to the rest of the code. So we have this select filter value here, which basically, I guess we're selecting a category, and here we're selecting the all category, right? We have all of these categories here, which we can actually select and show something based off. Now, before we continue with the rest of this video, let's take just a very quick moment to talk about the sponsor of today's video, Savala. Savala is a platform that you can use to deploy and host your applications. You can really think of this as the best of Vercel, Railway, or Fly.io, essentially all under one platform. What's really cool about Savala is that first of all, you can pretty much deploy from anywhere, right? If your application is on GitHub, on GitLab, Bitbucket, or even just a Docker image, you can deploy it and it all runs on the very secure and robust Kubernetes network that is backed by Kinsta. Also, Savala is not just for JavaScript applications like some of these other platforms. You can literally ship PHP, Rust, Java. You can have Laravel, Symfony, Flask, right? Whatever you want, pretty much Savala can support. And Savala has 25 data centers all across the world, so no matter where your users are or where you want to deploy your application from, Savala can support it. And they also make it super easy to integrate with Cloudflare's Edge Delivery Network to essentially serve your static content and also your static websites. Savala can also host your database for you, which, let's face it, most applications need a database, and they of course support all the popular ones, Postgres, MariaDB, MySQL, and they also have S3 compatible object storage to store all of your data. And when it comes to pricing, honestly, that's the best feature of Savala because they have no artificial limits. This means you can have unlimited users, unlimited resources, unlimited traffic, and their pricing is super simple. It's transparent. There's no hidden fees, and you're never going to get any surprise bills. You basically only have to pay for what you use. To try everything that Savala has to offer, click the first link in the description, and if you do that, you're going to get $50 in free credit to deploy to any application that you want. Thank you once again to Savala for sponsoring this video, and now let's get back to our code review. Cool. Then here we have something that looks like React query. I assume that's it, but it's using the shop repository. So what is the shop repository? Let's see. This shop repository is an object, and yeah, okay, this is React query. This is interesting. I like it. I quite like this actually. So here we have shop products summary. This is summary. I think that's a spelling mistake. That's okay. Maybe English is not the first language. Totally fine. No problem. Based on the category here, right, which is this enum here that we got, based off of that, we return a use query, which is React query. That's fine. I like this. So this is basically, if you have here shop product detail, update product reviews. This is nice. This is kind of a centralized way to have all of the queries and all of the mutations related to a specific domain entity, I guess, like the shop here. I guess if we look here at the API, do we have more things? So here we have API, we have API actions, we have put action, let's see, fetch products. So that's its own function that kind of doesn't follow the same patterns. Okay. What's shop API calls? That's again something that doesn't follow the same. These are the actual functions. I get it. Okay, these are the functions that are actually used in here, right? What is this? Okay, we have to look at this fetch builder to see what actually happens here. So this fetch builder here, right, receives the method, the ID, the category, the body, and the parameters, and then makes an Axios request. Okay. So this makes the actual Axios request, right? So then why do we have shop API calls? Are we using this anywhere in the application? Shop API calls, fetch shop arguments. Okay. Are we using fetch shop arguments? We're not. So this is actually not used at all, right? It's not used anywhere. And so this get summary products also is not used anywhere. This category here is also not used anywhere. Maybe this was a factor of like refactoring code afterwards. But again, I prefer this. This is a lot better. So yeah, let's ignore those. Let's not get confused. That's fine. Let's look again at this fetch builder because I like what this is happening here. So this is basically just a reusable function to create an Axios fetch request, which is cool because sometimes you want to set a base URL over here. You also want to set maybe some configuration of the ID. Again, this is fine. I don't see anything specifically wrong with that. And then you're making here a request and you're doing that. One thing with Axios is you can actually create a default Axios instance with some of this logic already created, and you can just use that. But again, if you do it here using a function, it's also fine. And then as long as you use that function everywhere and you're being consistent, that's fine. Now, the only thing that I might want to comment with this is kind of a fetch builder, which is meant to be generic, right? And this is taking here a category as an optional and also a user review over here. I don't like this specifically for the fact that you have something that is supposed to be generic, ideally used for anything, but you're passing props over here that are specific to some things, like a category or here a user review. which essentially then kind of locks you in, because if you want to add more things like a different body here that's not a user review, you can't do that. You would have to come in here and then put all of this type over here, right? And like do something like user review and then, you know, something else, right? It doesn't matter what it actually is. And that just kind of unnecessarily makes it complex. Ideally, you want to extract this even into, you did things here, right? You did like a type generic. Put this into a type generic, and then the body here can actually be inferred from the actual type, right? So for example, you come here and you do T like this, right? And then this body here is going to be T like this. If my keyboard would actually work, is going to be T. Then over here, you can maybe just do T like this, and then you can do T just like this. And this is a little bit wrong over here. And then you add here this T, which basically makes the fetch builder function also a generic. You pass the T here to these props, and now at least you have something that is generic that can work with a different type. Now, maybe you're not going to want to return specifically this type. Again, it's depending on what you want to do. But generally, my point here is that you want to make something that is generic and not have to have it pass props to essentially customize, because that is always going to be a recipe for disaster and complexity in your code. Now, going back here to the shop repository, I want to deal a little bit with these errors here, because ESLint is complaining that we're using React query not inside of a component or inside of a custom hook, which fair enough, we aren't, right? Even though we're using this inside of a hook, ESLint can't quite infer that. What instead I would actually do is, instead of use query here, I would do query options and import this from React query. And now you can just export and use the query options here, and you can use these options in the actual components with use query. For example, if I come back here to our shop container, this is shop product summary. What we can do here is we can do use query, and here we can import use query from React query just like this. We can import it, and now see here we're passing our actual properties over here to use query, which gives us the flexibility to, for example, extend this. Maybe in this component we want to do something a little bit different, so we can just extend this. Or maybe here we want to do use suspense query, right? Which is another hook that React query actually provides. And maybe we want to do the loading elsewhere in the application, and we can do that, and we can still pass those same exact query options just like before. Right, this kind of gives you a little bit more flexibility without locking you into always using React query all the time, always using use query. And you would obviously do the same things over here. And now you no longer have any ESLint errors because you're doing everything correctly. And it's a little bit more extensible. It fits a little bit more with the concept of a shop repository. Instead of exposing hooks, you're exposing the options that you pass to those hooks. Cool. With this, let's go back to our component. Let's see what we have here. Okay, this I like if this is what I think it is. So if error over here, we're going to return a separate component, which is extracted in its own component. Wonderful. I like this. We can now customize this to how we want, and we can return this in any component super easily. I like this. We're doing the same thing here for is loading, API call loading. We're also doing the same thing. That's cool as well. And here, if you don't have any data, we're returning API call error. Once again, I think this is a bit unnecessary. If we don't have data, we're going to return this. If data is null, we're going to return null. Oh, I get it. So if we don't have data, it means the query actually failed. But if data is null, it means from the backend, we return null, which is not an error. So in that case, we want to show null. I get it. Now, in the case of React query, this is a bit unnecessary. You don't need to recheck if the data is in there if you've already checked loading and you've already checked the loading, right? Because if error is not true and if loading is not true, then your request has actually succeeded, whether or not you have data here based on your actual value of the request. Now, this isn't working, again, because first of all, we have no types here, unknown, so we actually have no idea what we're actually returning, so that should be fixed. We would fix that by coming here, right, and actually providing here, just like we did over here with this fetch builder, we would provide here our type, whatever the type actually is, right, as a type over here. But again, we haven't done that. Now, if I do that, our data here is actually a response. And see, now it's saying undefined here. That's fine, because what you want to use is not this. You want to use is pending instead, and you want to access is pending, just like this from React query. And now you're going to see that this data here is defined, because now the type is narrowed successfully, because that's how React query works. You check error and you check is pending, and then you get your data, and then you don't have to check this over here. So we can remove things, and we can come here, we can remove this as well. And there you go. Now we removed just one line of code, and we made our code a little bit simpler. Now here we have some type errors that's saying that property products does not exist on this type. That's probably because we actually provided the wrong type over here, which is fine. Again, we're going to ignore that. The point was that you want to at least type what you're getting. And if you do it correctly, you're not going to have these errors. Now, again, this is not a bad component at all. I really like this. I like the fact that this was extracted into a custom place, into a custom repository. Just we should have extracted the query options so that we get the hook instead. And I really like this over here because we're early returning a separate component instead of putting all of that logic here, and we can use these components in other places too. Now, something that I would also add, but I'm not going to do it here because it's a whole process, is because you're using here React Router, I would also use at least the data way of React Router, the data, whatever they call it, so that you can have a loader here. Because essentially, if you do that, you can then put all of this logic here, all of this query fetching stuff, all of this loading and all of this error, you can put it outside of a React component. You can put it here inside of a loader. So this runs at the root level before the component actually mounted. And then by the time that the component actually mounted, you already have your data because the error and the spending is automatically handled. So it makes your component even simpler. And since you're anyways using the React Router, it shouldn't be that difficult to just add this data fetching layer, and that would simplify your code quite a lot. Cool. So let's look at some other things here. So here we have a page section. I assume this only puts some styles. Yep, that's perfectly fine. Here we have a shop filter. So let's see, we have a shop filter. See, this I like as well. This is extracted into another component. This one receives here all of these categories over here, which are all of these categories. Again, if this was an object, you could have just done object.keys of that object and you wouldn't have to do this here again. And then based on the selected value, we just have a select input to basically select our value. What I would do is I would even all of these things here over here. Fine. Okay, it's just an option. That's fine. But sometimes you want to style that option depending on, I mean, this is using the native select component here. But if you're using something like Chatien over here, you want to customize how each option is actually selected. And I would make this into its own separate component just to follow the single responsibility principle and keep everything neat and organized. But still, I like this quite a lot. Again, it's extracted into a custom component and this receives the props that it needs. And there you go. It just works. That's great. Then we have here this shop items, which receives the actual data that was fetched. So again, we're deferring the actual rendering of the data to another component. That's also very cool. This one takes all of these items over here. At least they're properly typed, which is nice. We know exactly what we're expecting. And then we're going to render out each one of these. Again, I would like to see this in its own separate component. Even honestly, put this in the same file. Just organize this in the same file, but make it a separate component just to keep things simple and organized. Trust me, it's going to pay off in the long run as you build more features and more components into this application. So here we're getting the product right for each one. That's fine. This is rendered inside of a list element. That's also fine. Here we have some data about the actual product. That's fine. We have a rating container. See, you created here a new component, which is great. I like to see that. So here we can come, we can open this. This is small. This is nice. I like to see that. This icon here is simply a SVG icon. Yep, fine. And this cover here is another component. Fine. See, I like that. So this developer, right, is understanding the value of small components, but they haven't done it quite everywhere, right? So that's just what's missing in this application, is to do more, to have a little bit more experience, and to just kind of refine the craft of putting everything into small components. Also, something I noticed here with the class names, what this developer is doing here is they're putting class names using string interpolation, and this can sometimes in Tailwind actually not produce the results that you want, simply because of the order of the class names. The order actually matters. And so what you would typically do is you would use CLSX and TW class names, or TW merge. I believe that's what it is. Basically what Chatien uses to automatically order your classes. And this also gives you the flexibility that you can also override the classes in a safe way. This is a minor thing and it doesn't always cause problems, but when it does, it's actually very difficult to debug and to realize. So you're safer to just use the standard approach and just use that custom utility function that Chatien has. And this is then simply just a navigation link, and that's pretty much it. Again, this is for the most part great. It can just do with a little bit of tidying up just to make things a little bit simpler, but overall, I like this. Let's now go back to, I guess we can close this, we can close this, we can save and close this, we can close this as well. Let's maybe look at another page just to see if anything's different. Let's go to the product detail. So same pattern over here. That's fine. Nothing really wrong with that. Oh, see, yeah, this over here, the search params, this is the responsibility of this page over here. This is your page. Root pages, right? Product detail. This is where you want to access the URL, any page related stuff. The fact that we're doing things inside of this component doesn't really make sense. Put this inside of this main component here, fetch any data that you might need, and then pass that data directly into this component here, which is responsible for rendering that data, right? Which kind of also applies to all of these things. Although these are good and the patterns here are good, you want to put things in this page here because the page is the one that is responsible for fetching. And then you have the benefit that when you migrate to an actual loader with some data, right, you can put that directly on the loader here. And usually your loader is going to be in the same place as the page component. So it just makes more sense to put the things there because that's really their place. So here we have the same thing. If ID is equal to null. So in this case, if the ID is equal, if the ID from the URL is equal to null, that's fine. API call error, that's fine, no problem with that. Same thing here, right? You would put this inside of use query as well. Same thing here, I like that. Change this to is pending, get rid of this one over here, and everything else is okay. Here we have two components, which again, I like, right? Separate components, that's very good. Let's quickly look at these product details views. This one is pretty much the same thing. Nothing really to say here, that looks okay. And this product description container, kind of same thing. This get button class here, that's fine. But again, we're using it, yeah, string interpolation, use CN, right, the CN function, this will become a lot better. And then this prod nav is another item. Yeah, there's a bunch of enums here. Just convert all of these to objects and your application is going to be better. So with that, I think that's it. I think we saw enough. I think pretty much all of these other pages are pretty much the same, right? Again, it's a very simple application with just a couple of roots, but I think we've seen enough. And this developer has understood at least the patterns that are required and the mindset. And they've just started to implement that mindset, which is good. That's what you're supposed to do. And now what this developer needs, they only need more experience, more time, right? More practice to exercise all of these things and to really refine their craft. So if you're watching the developer, I really hope that this video was useful to you. Your code is good. You're on the right path. Just keep working, just keep building, and just keep learning. And I promise you, you will become a senior developer in no time. And with that, that's it. That's all that I have for this video. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to leave it a big thumbs up. You can also click here to subscribe, or you can click here to watch a different video of mine that YouTube seems to think that you're really going to enjoy. With that being said, my name has been Darius Kozin. This is Kozin Solutions. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.